Hello, STEM Nation. Jeff here, and welcome to episode number 94 of STEM on Fire, where we interview practicing professionals in the area of science, technology, engineering, and math to help guide students interested in STEM careers. If you like what you hear, please share with a friend. Now let's get fired up today with our guest, David, and I hope our chat will help ignite your passion towards a STEM degree. And hopefully I get this right, because David has a lot of background here, so you may have to help me out, David. Okay. So David's got an undergrad in computer science. He's got a PhD degree in Biomolecular Structure and Design, and is the Director of Research eScience at the University of Washington and a professor in the Chemical Engineering Department. Is that right?
Yep, you nailed it.
All right. Hey, David, fill in any gaps and share a bit of your personal life.
Wow. I mean, I think you got through it all. Before I started with eScience and chemical engineering, I did a postdoc in bioengineering. So there's just one more fun engineering in there. In my personal life, I have two high-energy boys, a high-energy dog, and a wife that somehow puts up with all of that. She's also a scientist, so we get to talk a lot about science at the dinner table, which is fun.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, David, welcome aboard. And could you, actually the postdoc thing, could you go into kind of what that postdoc means and what you did there?
Okay. So the typical progression for say your average faculty member is to do an undergrad degree and then to follow on and get a PhD, so a Doctor of Philosophy degree. And typically then you'll go and do what's called a postdoc, which is 2 or so years to polish off, complete your training, learn a few new skills. And then at that point you really will, sort of start your career with a real, quote unquote, real job.
So what was your postdoc in again?
It was in bioengineering.
Bioengineering, yeah. So you've got your PhD in biomolecular structure and your undergrad in computer science. I think most folks understand what computer science is. Mm-hmm. Could you delve into what biomolecular structure and design is and what you can do with that?
Sure. So our bodies and all living things are made up of biomolecules, so DNA, RNA, protein, and in the living setting, those biomolecules have to have a structure that allows them to do their function. And so understanding that structure is important to understanding their function. That's one thing. But then the new thing that we're really interested in, I think, so that was 2000 when I started. So the new thing I was really interested in at that point was designing new biomolecules. So how can we design, say, new proteins, which are the structures and functions of life? How can we design new proteins that do things that nature doesn't already do? So that take a small molecule pollutant and convert it into some inert form.
So you're engineering molecules, for a lack of better term. Is that kind of there at simple terms?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay. So how did you go about going from computer science into biomolecular structure and design versus just starting with, let's say, biology to begin with?
Right. So I grew up in a time where computers were kind of becoming a commodity, where you could first buy one for your own house, and own your own computer. And that was just super exciting to me. And I spent a lot of time in dark rooms with green screen text, pounding away at keyboard, trying to understand how computers work. And so I knew that I wanted to do something with computers in my life. And then when I started my undergrad, I loved the computer science classes, but we had this requirement that you do an internship, or what we called was called a co-op, but it's essentially a 6-month paid internship, somehow connected to computer science. And a lot of my friends were going off to work for software companies, working in cubicles, doing cool things. They were excited about it, but the whole point was to make a little bit more money for the company. And I wanted to do something with computer science that was sort of more oriented towards making the world a better place, solving health-related problems, figuring out how to treat our environment better. And so I went and did a co-op in a research lab that was studying protein structure. studying how proteins exist in our body and how they function. And I got to do some super cool things there, like go to high energy physics laboratory and shoot proteins with X-rays and just do some super neat things that I never thought I would ever do in my life. And it changed what I wanted to do with my computer science degree. And so from then on, I took a lot of biology, I took a lot of chemistry, and kind of oriented myself to be somebody that was broadly trained in biology, chemistry, and computer science. Now today, you can go and you can get an undergraduate degree in biology that's computationally oriented and bioinformatics. But at that time, those degree programs didn't really exist. So in a lot of ways, I got to experiment and be a guinea pig for what those programs might look like in the future.
So how are you actually leveraging your computer science degree in the biomolecular area?
A lot of what we do is using computers to solve problems, to uncover hidden structure in experimental data around biomolecules. So we'll have an experimental collaborator who will do a really large experiment and generate a ton of data, like, this is how this organism behaves under a variety of different conditions. And they'll give us those data, and then we'll write computer software or use some of our existing software or develop new data science methods to understand the experimental data that our experimental collaborators are generating. And from that, learn the behavior of this organism or learn the behavior of a molecule in the body or understand how a battery works in the electrochemical sense. So these are all different molecular systems, and you can do experiments to generate a lot of data. But gone are the days where a single individual reads things out of their notebook and uses a calculator. In these days, it's how do you compute on these data? How do you extract that knowledge and information through software?
Yeah, so it feels like your computer science is a tool in your toolbox to help solve the biomolecular type of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's kind of cool is that now biomolecules are my favorite, but having that understanding of molecular behavior, of molecules, of chemistry, a lot of the things that we're doing in the biological space are actually starting to be applicable in other spaces. So other spaces that have molecules that are behaving, we can actually start working on with our computer science tools. So I talked about batteries, but solar panels, other places where there are effectively molecules doing the thing of interest. You can apply computer science methods, software methods to understand how those molecules are functioning and what they're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, STEM Nation, listen, you have to develop programming skills, some computer science skills. So, no matter what degree you're going for, I'm going to say, at least go take a couple of programming classes. Once you know how to kind of program, they're all kind of the same. The languages are a little bit different and structure's a little bit different, but you want to get that baseline to know how to utilize the computers out there, regardless of what STEM degree you go for.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The undergraduate time is the perfect time to experiment and try lots of things. And one of those things on your I need to try this as an undergrad list is taking some programming classes. I totally agree with you.
Absolutely. And, you brought up bioinformatics. What is bioinformatics?
So obviously it's applied to biology, but there's a lot of data that gets generated by experimental methods in broadly the space of biology, and applying the correct statistical techniques, using the correct, say, machine learning algorithm, or understanding how to visualize and process those data as they relate to biological data. I would say broadly that's bioinformatics.
All right. And David, so you're doing research at the university level, but if somebody went off and got a biomolecular PhD, but didn't really want to do research at the university level, what are some opportunities out there that it would exist for them?
Right. So I can go two ways with this, and I will. The first is pharmaceutical companies. I think that they're super interested in people that can understand how certain proteins relate to disease, and then how you can design drugs pharmaceuticals to interact with those proteins, for example, to mitigate a disease state. There are other places that those kinds of skills are useful for example, in synthetic biology. So if you want to design new microorganisms or redesign existing microorganisms to do something like remediate a contaminated environmental site or produce value-added compounds from a waste product, that would be something that would be, broadly speaking, synthetic biology. And that could be an industry. And then I think one thing that I tell everybody that's pursuing a PhD is that it's ultimately a degree that when you have finished, that has really demonstrated that you know how to learn on your own. And so it's not uncommon to see people with PhDs in physics, for example, working in finance, because they have a tremendous amount of understanding of, say, math and calculus and statistics in order to work in a physics space. But then those skills are redeployable, and they can learn whatever new things they need to learn in the finance sector. So I think a doctorate generally is a license to do a lot of different things and not necessarily focus on what your research was for your PhD.
Yeah, I agree with that, David. That even just general STEM degree, you go into your PhD, it just shows that you have the grit to stick with something. You know how to solve problems. You know how to learn, and that's a lot of what companies are learning for. Because once you get a job, at a company, you're going to have to learn what it is you need to learn to be successful at that company, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can't know everything all the time, anyway. So I think. I think you're exactly right. Demonstrating to a potential employer that you have that skill and ability to learn. And also, when you're doing a doctoral degree, you learn a lot of communication skills, verbal and visual and written. Over and over and over and over again, you do that. And so, again, that's another skill that's highly transferable, either in industry or academia or even government.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to have those communication skills. And David, we're going to go over to an area to ask, what has you really fired up today?
The most exciting thing to me is the broad adoption of data science methods in all domains, whether it's astronomy, biology, climate, oceanography, public health, zoology, every area of science and engineering is seeing is undergoing this data revolution, and we're seeing that the new practitioners of these disciplines are learning this thing called data science, and that's what I think is really exciting to me. And so, whatever I can do to be involved in that, to sort of push out the domain boundaries and increase the adoption of data science, that's something that's super exciting to me.
Yeah, and when you're looking at classes in college, if you see some classes that revolve around, let's say, big data or AI or machine learning, those would be some classes to maybe look at if they're not part of your core, to look at as electives.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, David, and now you had to get through a lot of schooling, and this is targeted at juniors and seniors in high school that are just on their initial journey. What are some things that you think would be interesting or helpful for STEM Nation to know to get through college?
Well, I think we've kind of hit on it already, but try new things. Don't get stuck in these are the 10 courses or 20 or 30 or whatever you need to get your degree. Explore the boundaries of that. And I think, my favorite people to work with are the people that can think really broadly and that have a lot of exposure and experience to new ideas. And it's really exciting when somebody comes to the table and they've brought an idea from a totally different setting. Like they've brought an idea to solve a problem in biomolecular structure that came from video games or came from logistics. Like there are so many ways that you can learn and reapply ideas that I think is just one of the most important things that you can do during your education is get exposed to new things and try new things.
So what I heard there, David, is if you're playing a lot of Grand Theft Auto, you may have some good ideas.
I don't know about Grand Theft Auto, but there are definitely some. If your listeners have ever heard of the game called Fold It, it's a really super interesting game that's essentially a team put together this idea that we want to study protein structure. And we're going to gamify that. We're going to make a video game out of people using their supercomputers in their head to solve protein structures. And so that's what they did. And you can go out there and play this game. It's called Fold It, one word, Foldit. And you'll learn something about protein structure, but you may also very well, help solve a pressing problem in protein structure.
All right, STEM Nation, put down those Xbox controllers and go look up Fold It and play that for a little bit. All right, and an aha moment, David. An aha moment you had that you think would be interesting to STEM Nation, and maybe how you turn that into success.
Yeah. Well, I think I've had a few of those. I sure hope I keep having them, because if I figured everything out, then I think my life is going to be pretty boring from here on out. So
I would agree.
So I think one of the big ones for me was during my graduate work. So while I was getting my PhD, I was really focused on simulations of proteins. So how do we sort of put a microscope at a single molecule level and take a movie of what that protein is doing in our body? And that's all done on supercomputers. It's all done with software. And so my job as a graduate student was to write software to run those simulations. And as a team, we had decided that if we had simulations of thousands of proteins, that we would understand protein dynamics writ large, right? That having all of that data would somehow magically make us into, masters of protein dynamics. And it was like kind of a big deal. Nobody had ever attempted it before. And so after a lot of person hours out of many, many millions of hours of supercomputing time, we had a huge data set of this. So imagine taking 400 desktop computers worth of storage and putting all of our protein movies on there. And we did it, right? And, a lot of high fives were going around. And I had this aha moment when I realized that just having all of these protein movies, these simulations, didn't actually mean we understood anything. So data by itself is not knowledge or actionable. You have to analyze those data. You have to understand what the data are telling you. You have to apply what I call data science, what a lot of us are calling data science methods, to a big data set if you want to actually extract any information or actionable knowledge out of it. And that was a click for me that took me sort of, changed the course of my my professional career. That I didn't just want to be a data generator. I wanted to be a data scientist.
Yeah, and you know what, David? Every company out in the world that's looking at AI, they've collected tons and tons of data,
Yep.
And now it's a matter of trying to figure out, how do you make sense of that data?
Right.
That is the key. All right. Hey, we're going to take a quick pause to thank Audible, who's our sponsor. You can head to STEMonFirebook.com. That's STEMonFirebook.com to get a free audiobook of your choosing. If you decide to cancel within 30 days, there's no cost, and you keep the audiobook. And we move on to the lightning round time. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Best piece of advice you've ever received?
You are not an imposter.
Oh, I didn't get that advice.
Yeah. I think one of the most pervasive things that I see, at the undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate level is the self-inflicted wound of the imposter syndrome. And this essentially is where you're stuck in, and it could even be paralyzing. You're stuck in this thinking that, I'm not good enough to be here. I don't belong here. Somebody's going to figure out that I don't belong here because I'm an imposter. And that the good news is that's all in your head. It's 100% not true. And yeah, you're not an imposter. If you are where you are, then there's good reason for you to be there, and you're not an imposter.
Absolutely. And the imposter syndrome has come up before on the podcast. So that is something that I think you'd be surprised that a lot of people, most people struggle with that.
I think so.
And a personal habit that contributes to your success.
I think this counts as a personal habit, but make sure that in your job, at least once a day, there's something that you really love doing. So I don't like doing paperwork for travel reimbursements, but I don't spend every day doing that, right? So there's some of that, but then the rest of the day, hopefully I'm doing the things that I love, and that's what keeps me going and gets me up every day.
Yep. And a book you would recommend?
Oh, only one? I'm going to cheat.
Okay, only one. Cheat. No, there's no cheating. Is that how you made it through college?
That I recommend. And two of his books. The author is Richard Rhodes, and the first book is Energy, A Human Perspective. I think I got that title right. And the second one is Making of the Atomic Bomb. And I just love history of science. And I fulfilled all my undergrad humanities requirements by taking history of science classes. I highly recommend that experience. But both of these books tell the story of energy and tell the story of, say, the creation, the understanding, the development of quantum mechanical theory by vignettes. And so you kind of get to look into the world as it was, 200 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 years ago, and see the progression of both of those things.
All right. You can check out the show notes on stemandfire.com to get those books. And as we wrap up, can you share a parting piece of guidance for STEM Nation? And then we'll say goodbye.
Never stop learning and think about how you can make the world a better place while having fun.
And with that, David, we will say goodbye. And I hope you enjoyed that chat today. You could head over to STEMonfire.com, subscribe to the email list to get the latest happenings, and be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast player and share it with a friend. Until next time, I hope this chat has helped ignite your passion in STEM.